This story is a true account of something we actually experienced during a trip to Osaka, Japan in 2017. Thanks for watching. Your likes and subscribes greatly help me make good videos. At that time, my husband and I were planning a trip to Osaka, Japan. We were looking around for accommodations online when we found a place that was incredibly cheap. These days, there are many accommodations where you can rent an entire house. And this house was one of them, priced at an astonishing 3,000 yen per night. But there's always a reason why accommodation is cheap. It was far from the city center of Osaka, and from the photos, it looked a bit old. So we hesitated and thought about it, but feeling that cheap was the best after all, we made the reservation. Finally, on the day we arrived in Osaka, with excited hearts, we set out to find our accommodation. But since we couldn't speak Japanese and didn't know the way, it took us half a day to finally arrive. The accommodation, when we actually arrived, was a much older building than we had expected. But thinking we had really found a great deal for 3,000 yen, we went inside. The accommodation had a structure with a small living room and one bedroom, and there were charming little props here and there. And in the living room, a guestbook left by Japanese people was open, giving it a slightly different, exotic feel from Korea. And my husband was taking pictures of various spots in the accommodation. But suddenly, we got a strange feeling. Looking closely, the thick dust accumulated in various places, the damp smell of mold, and the overall atmosphere felt as if no one had been here for a long time. Thinking it might be because it hadn't been aired out for too long, we first opened the windows to ventilate the place and sent a message to the host saying we had arrived safely. And the reply we got back was a long set of instructions written in Japanese. Assuming they were the usual instructions you find anywhere, we decided to head out to the city center of Osaka for sightseeing. We ate delicious food, did some sightseeing, and enjoyed the night view, only returning to the accommodation around 11 p.m. But back inside the accommodation, the damp, moldy smell we had noticed initially, that smell was even stronger now. Even though we had deliberately left the windows open to ventilate before we left. And then, to our ears, we heard a booming, echoing sound, like something you'd hear in a cave. And just then, suddenly, the power went out in the house. My husband looked for the switch and flicked it several times, but still, the lights didn't come on. Not knowing what to do, I searched on my phone for Japan accommodation power outage, and a post someone had uploaded caught my eye. The contents I read slowly were, "There's a foul smell in the house. I hear strange sounds. And then suddenly, the power goes out. These are all signs that there's a ghost." For a moment, it was chilling, but I decided to brush it off, thinking it was just a simple power outage. It was very late, and we were tired from walking around all day. But first of all, we weren't people who believed in things like ghosts, so we decided to wash up and go to bed. As I soaked in the warm water, feeling the fatigue melt away and my mood improving, just then, suddenly, the lights came back on with a pop. Thinking the lights were back on. In that very moment, I caught a glimpse of something reflected in the mirror. It was the figure of a woman. Her face wasn't clearly visible, but it was definitely a woman. Thinking I must have seen something wrong, I closed my eyes and then looked again. But the woman was still standing there. Thinking I shouldn't make eye contact no matter what, I lowered my head and rushed out of the bathroom. Scared now, I ran to the bedroom to call for my husband. But meanwhile, perhaps he was too tired. He was sleeping in bed, completely covered by the blanket up to his head. It was late at night, and the thought crossed my mind that maybe I had seen things. And thinking I needed to leave this place quickly tomorrow morning, I also lay down next to my husband. However, the accommodation must have been too cold, as I kept having a slight cough. Just then, I felt my husband's hand wrap around my neck and caress it. He stroked my cheek and held my hand tightly. But the strange thing was, my husband's hand was too cold. Thinking it was because the accommodation was too cold, I held my husband's hand and fell asleep. And then, the next day arrived. When I opened my eyes, my husband wasn't next to me. Normally, my husband was someone who slept so soundly he wouldn't wake up even if I woke him. It was really strange that he had woken up first. So I went out to the living room, and my husband was lying on the sofa, sleeping, wearing the same clothes he had worn yesterday. I was so surprised I woke my husband up, and what he said was, he said he had fallen asleep on the sofa while waiting for me to finish showering because he was tired. From the beginning, my husband hadn't come to bed at all. He had been sleeping on the sofa. And at my husband's next words, I was left speechless.
But wait, didn't you also come here and sleep next to me after you showered?
Panicked, I asked him if he hadn't touched my neck in bed yesterday. And my husband looked at my neck in surprise and said, "What's wrong with your neck?" I had been thinking my body was a bit stiff from sleeping in the cold, but my neck, cheek, and hand, which I had thought my husband had touched, were all covered in dark blue bruises. Thinking I shouldn't stay here any longer, I told my husband everything that had happened yesterday and quickly left the accommodation. And then I sent a message to the host using a translation app, saying I couldn't stay in this house any longer, and a reply came immediately from the host. But the message that just arrived was the exact same message we had received when we first checked in. So I put the message content into a translator, and the contents were like this. Refunds are possible even on the day of check-in. When using the bathroom, please leave the door open if possible. When staying alone, please leave only one pillow on the bed. If the lights suddenly go out, do not stay inside the house. And other inexplicable instructions were listed. Then, perhaps thinking of something, my husband started frantically searching for the pictures he had taken at the accommodation. And from the photo he had taken of the guest book, he typed the writings left by previous guests into the translator. My husband's face turned deathly pale. The contents in the guest book were, "Since the power went out, I see other people. The reason the accommodation fee is cheap is because there are 3 more people in this house, besides us. 1 on the sofa, 1 on the bed, and 1 in the bathroom mirror." The guest book contained only the strange sightings reported by previous guests. From that day on, we absolutely never stay in accommodations that seem too cheap.